Welcome to Relationships as Spiritual Practice, Bridging the Secular and Spiritual, with your host, Alia Lowe Chardet, founder of Mindful Compassionate Dialogue and the Wise Heart Community.
Hello, thank you for being here with me today. I'm excited today to bring Mindful Compassionate Dialogue for teams. So if you work on a team, this will be a podcast for you with some helpful information about how to integrate MCD with your team. And I have Seferino Siniso here from South Africa to talk about that with. Morning, Seferino.
Good morning, Alia. Lovely to be here.
Very happy to see you. Happy you're doing this in the world. Very inspiring. Yeah. Do you want to tell folks a little bit about who you are and what has you bring in this new chapter of MCD for teams?
Yes, so I'm calling in from Cape Town, South Africa, and what really motivated and inspired this work is essentially the current work that I'm doing within MCD and the coaching work that I'm doing in the realm of personal and intimate relationships, and then really just observing and experiencing the change and the benefits of doing this work in the lives of the people and the relationships that are cultivating and integrating this consciousness and set of skills in their relationships. So then just really wanting to amplify and expand those impacts and those benefits. And and I believe that organizations are an important part of this global paradigm shift that we are currently witnessing all around the world, which is evident by all the catastrophes and challenges that we're facing. And so that summarizes.
So I'm hearing that you've already been working as a coach for folks, and now you're expanding into this realm of organizations. And part of your vision there is that we want to create this big ripple effect to support this next phase of planet Earth and the consciousness we want to create.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you have really some experience with working with organizations in the past?
So after graduating from university, I then entered the corporate world. And I spent a number of years working in marketing and business management. And that was my first entry into the world of work straight out of university.
Yeah, okay.
And I was being a very social person. I had high hopes and high optimism for the space. And yet my experience was ultimately, I can distill that down to both my experience and observation of others was disconnect. Disconnect from myself, disconnect from others. And I've experienced this as an environment where it was required, or if not required, at the very least, the space was not equipped for us to bring all aspects and parts of ourselves to the workplace. So there was big components of parts of ourselves, of being human, and these core universal needs that we had to either suppress or leave at the door, and resulting in a lot of people showing up to the workplace incomplete,
So I'm hearing you say that you're envisioning a workplace in which we can show up as whole people and name what's true for us relative to that work environment and work at this level of universal needs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely.
And you want to help
and that
teams do that.
precisely. And,
Yeah.
and that's the level of connection that's needed for us to show up as our full selves, to really express fully, to access our wisdom, our skills, our creativity, our innovation. Those are all the benefits from showing up as full, complete human beings, our full
Mm.
creativity and effectiveness.
Yeah, and I imagine if someone's listening and they're like, great, I want to bring MCD to my team, I like the idea, then just hearing what you're saying there's one helpful starting point to help their team recognize that when we're fully connected to our own needs, we become more creative, more effective, more collaborative coworkers, and the mission of the organization is served in that individual wholeness. Does that sound like what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Alia, following my experience within this corporate working environment, I then realized actually that I wanted to move on to something which was a bit more meaningful
Okay.
and purposeful for me. And I then went into regenerative agriculture.
Okay.
So I then went to study agriculture. And here we've got an industry and a movement that is really pioneering this shift in this paradigm shift, creating this alternative new world that's grounded in care, connection, collaboration, and power with consciousness.
Yeah, a lot of positive visioning, a whole community
Ex-
wanting to create positive change.
exactly. And yet I noticed that the same dynamic was present and preventing this movement from realizing its mission and its vision. This lack of
Mm.
connection and relationship to really collaborate around that vision.
Yeah, an
And
organization can have this beautiful positive vision, but it doesn't directly translate into this deep collaboration and synergy on a team to make that vision happen. We still have the same skills that we were conditioned with in a world that isn't very often very relationship savvy.
exactly. So
Yeah, it's tragic.
very tragic. And so what ends up happening is we're repeating those same patterns. Those
Yeah.
patterns of reactivity, of disconnect,
Mm.
which then ultimately halts and hinders productivity, efficiency, and
Mm-hmm.
effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony of the matter, or even the tragedy, is that during my time as a farmer, before I then went into project managing farming projects,
Uh-huh.
this whole movement of regenerative agriculture is built on these very core principles on which nature
Mm.
operates. And this
Mm.
is true whether it's a farming ecosystem or a farm organism or this mega forest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those principles are all about interconnectedness. It's about relationship. It's about
Yeah.
collaboration.
Yeah.
It's about full expression
Mm.
and creativity. And yet, the people that were stewarding and meant to co-create these farming organisms or creating these social agricultural organizations were not embodying these relational skills.
Oh, yeah. They were working with this hugely inspiring model of interconnection and synergy, and yet they were stopped by their own conditioning, reactivity, and lack of relational skill.
Exactly. And
Painful irony.
painful.
Yeah.
And it's at that moment where I realized that actually my real work is in this realm of relationship and to really
Hmm.
starting supporting others in
Yeah.
cultivating these relationship and communication skills.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I then went on to went to coaching school and to become a coach. And during my journey as a coach, I came across MCD and realized these precise and concrete like skills and pathway to becoming skillful and masterful at relationships.
Mm.
And and I just became very clear to me that without this inner harmony, this harmony with self and others, we cannot actually create harmony with nature,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with a more than human world.
Yeah, our movements, our desire for change in this world needs to come from a different consciousness, a consciousness of connection and skill among the humans as well as among humans and nature.
Exactly.
Yeah. So folks are listening, hopefully, for what are they going to do? How are they going to bring MCD to their team? Or if you were going to bring MCD to their team, what would that look like? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so there's three there's three main primary ways to get involved and to really bring MCD teams into an organization. And then first I would say is the MCD Teams Foundations training.
Okay,
So this is a 4-week training
nice.
which runs 1 2 hour class per week. And this can be done online as well as in person. And
Okay.
this really embeds and lays the foundation of MCD teams and covers all of the relationship and communication skills and competencies, the emotional intelligence and resilience to help you create a team that's a connected, collaborative, high performing team. It's grounded in these skills.
Can you give some examples of what that curriculum contains?
So within this curriculum, we cover the first 6 relationship competencies within the MCD system. So on a high level, that would be empathy, appreciation, self-empathy, honest expression, recognizing reactivity, and managing reactivity.
Mm.
And then and then each of those relationship competencies has 6 concrete and specific skills. And then there's obviously the 9 foundations of selfhood as well, which is weaved in throughout the competencies and the curriculum.
Yeah.
So that would be the starting point or the most impactful place for an organization or a team that really wants to integrate these skills and competencies.
And someone new to MCD might not know that with each one of those competencies, there's 6 very practical skills for being clear and grounded in your communication, for separating the issue, if it's a conflict or if it's a goal or a project, separating that from the needs that a team wants to meet by doing that project so that it can really skillfully track where are we coming from, what are we wanting to take care of, and gives that team a reference point for, oh, is this strategy really take care of the need that this project is meant to meet? And interpersonally as well, allowing each person to speak with self-responsibility regarding where they're coming from when they share.
Exactly. And that skill that you mentioned is quite an important one, that distinguishing between a universal need and the respective strategies or preferences that we have for meeting those needs. And as soon as we become aware of that distinction and we're able to we become flexible about the when, the how, the who of meeting a particular need, that really opens up the space for collaboration with our fellow team members and colleagues. It really opens up creativity and also brings that sense of resilience.
Yeah, I want to just pause there because you say it kind of easily, but it's hard to transmit for those who don't know the power of being able to separate the core thing we want to take care of, the universal need or value, and the what, the when, the how, as you said. And you said the word flexibility. And so when I hear that, I imagine these teams who get mired down in detail and being attached to my way, this way, your way, having conflict over that. And I see when you say that, this capacity for a team in the moment of a conflict around a strategy to just call a pause, take a breath using one of the many skills you've taught them around reactivity to regulate their reactivity, and then having a point to start over again in the discussion, to ground themselves. Okay, let's remember that we're proposing these strategies because we want to care for needs of integrity, purpose, contribution, security, whatever it might be, right? Whatever they've named. And then starting again, but starting with a flexibility and referencing the needs as they propose the strategies. And that flexibility comes from an individual being able to say, oh, right, I don't need to attach to my strategy. All I need to do is check if my strategy really meets the need that we're proposing. It's a shift in inner orientation.
Precisely that. Thank you for articulating that so clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this really just opens up that the possibility of what becomes possible, allows us to
Yeah.
step out of what we are familiar with. Because
Yeah.
oftentimes in organizations, in teams, what we are familiar with, both on a very individual level, our strategies, as well as a team organization, might not actually be the most effective. But we continue to repeat it simply because we are so attached to that strategy, or we conflate the underlying need, the
Yeah.
intention with that strategy.
Right. Making room for lots of creativity and new ideas with that flexibility of mind.
Yes. Yeah.
I
And of
like
course,
it.
less conflict.
Yeah. Being able to call a pause and recenter as a group so conflicts don't escalate.
They don't escalate, and everyone's needs ultimately met. We all ultimately, or usually in most cases, many cases, people want the same thing, but they get tied up within the strategy, which make it
Yeah.
seem like we want different things.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so as an example, you might have two team members, or a team member and a manager or supervisor, who really deeply care about efficiency, or competence or effectiveness, but they've
Mm-hmm.
got very different strategies to meet that. In the one colleagues, their idea is being tied to the office from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m., not leaving the desk.
Yeah.
For another team member, they work most efficiently and effectively early hours of the day, with a break during the day to attend to personal matters, and in the evening, the afternoon, they continue their work from home. That's set up. So for both of those strategies can actually lead to effectiveness, productivity, and efficiency. So
Mm.
getting clear on, when we propose a particular strategy, what is it, the underlying need? So when a manager says, I want everyone working 10 hours a day at the
Yeah.
office,
Yeah.
what need is he trying to meet? Oh,
Yeah.
the aim is not to have you tied to your desk for those hours. The aim is
Right.
actually
Yes.
efficiency and effectiveness. And then getting curious, how else can we meet that efficiency and effectiveness?
Right. And then being able to carry out an experiment. Setting up an experiment where we have 2 weeks working in the office, everybody's at their desk, as you say, and then we have 2 weeks with this alternate schedule where people work partially from home, and you find some things to measure there and can do actual discernment and experimenting and innovating quite quickly. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
exciting.
from our experience.
Yeah, based on experience rather than attachment to ideas or what one thinks should happen.
Exactly.
So a team does this 4-week training with you. Yeah, I'm excited to hear you have something so concrete set up. And then what
Yeah, so
happens? Like, what would they notice at the end of those 4 weeks, or be doing or implementing?
so there's a couple of things. On one level, if we really zoom into the team, we'd observe a few things that become evident. So one would be that team members' needs are being met more often, and their needs are being met in harmony with the needs of other coworkers as well as the needs of the broader organization. Yeah. Team members would be energized by being at work. There'll
Mm,
be a sense of aliveness
mm,
because they're bringing whole self to the work environment. They're able to fully express themselves, to clearly and transparently communicate with one another.
yeah.
They would have a sense of being valued and respected. They would feel included. There'll be a sense of inclusion. They would be more regulated within themselves and with one another.
Yeah.
There'll be obviously a greater sense of collaboration amongst the team, creativity. So that's on one level when one really zooms into the team. And then when we zoom out a little bit and we take a bit of a bird's eye view of the team, we'll notice a few particular nuanced things amongst the team. And
Okay.
that would be one, that the team members would bring consistent awareness to the quality of connection in any given moment
Mm,
with one another and within themselves.
mm,
So, for an example, just like when we're listening to the radio, when we notice there's some static,
yeah.
we reach out to adjust the dial to get a clearer
Yeah.
signal,
Yeah.
so we can get a clearer message as it was intended by
Yeah.
the person. So, likewise, we would adjust, we'd bring our awareness to that quality of connection. Then the second thing is they would actually track whether or not that quality of connection is actually serving the universal needs or the true intention for them coming together for that meeting or that gathering, whatever the case may be.
Right.
So, in other words, we need a certain minimum level of connection in order to collaborate on a work project.
Mm. That's a whole paradigm shift right there. I just want to highlight. And this is really the fulcrum, like the center of the consciousness and skills that we're offering with mindful, compassionate dialogue, is understanding how human beings work, and that in any given activity, we need a critical mass of connection for that activity to flow, to have flow, grace, efficiency. It's a really powerful point. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because I think often, and you've talked about the disconnect in the workplace, is the mind, and the world in capitalism as well, is so focused on the goal that there's a willingness to just kind of steamroll or push through disconnect or in order to get to the goal, and then that path to the goal becomes fraught with conflict and gets slowed down by reactivity. And you're saying, let's start from the beginning with the amount of connection we need so that the whole project can flow with a sense of efficiency and grace and ease.
Exactly. And I think this word connection
Mm-hmm.
often is not so familiar in the work environment. It's often like frowned upon, or there's a
Yeah,
little bit of resistance to it.
yeah.
So also just to make clear that connection lives on a continuum.
Mm.
And on one end of that continuum is that intimate connection,
Mm-hmm.
which is in the realm of family, romantic relationships, friends, and so forth. But
Mm-hmm.
further down that continuum, there's a more functional connection. The level of connection that's needed to feel comfortable and safe with the other, that's
Mm-hmm.
needed to challenge one another on a work project,
Yeah.
to effectively communicate our needs, what's working, what's not working, or to communicate and get clear on the essential aspects of a project. So for all of those things to happen effectively requires that certain level of connection,
Mm.
which without, as you said, which would often happen, if we just steamroll through a particular thing,
Yeah.
people start getting reactive, people
Yeah.
start disengaging,
Yeah.
and people start, as the conflicts arise, or people start, sabotaging the project, stop responding to emails, little micro aggressions start occurring, and it ultimately just, depending on the
Mm-hmm.
severity of it, halts productivity in that team or their organizational project, on the rails,
Yeah.
that productivity.
Yeah. And I want to highlight that we're talking about a critical mass of connection that supports that work environment. And that actually means real clear life-serving boundaries. And that becomes possible when the team and each individual knows explicitly, as we come together in this meeting, the needs that we want to care for are. And so when they've named, like, let's say 3 needs in that meeting, we're going to take care of these 3 needs: clarity, information, and inspiration regarding our project, let's say. And so it creates a natural reference point in which, Tom's going off talking about XYZ, and he's really in the mode of organizing, but the team isn't doing organizing today. So it becomes easy to set a boundary and say, Tom, it sounds like you're talking about a need for organization and order. In today's meeting, we're just focusing on information and clarity and inspiring ourselves around this project. Would you be willing to hold that until the next meeting or whatever it is? So I just want to add that boundaries piece, because as we talk about being a whole human being, people can get a little scared, like, oh, does that mean, Seferino, you're going to come to work and talk about your dog, and we all have to listen and give you empathy about your dog? No. You might check in and say, I'm aware my dog's at the vet today, and so I'm just holding that. I'm not needing anything around it. So you get to be a whole person, but it's not about this boundaryless psychological space in which we're sharing everything and trying to handle everything. We're really staying very focused with these skills.
Exactly. Yeah. And as you said, life-saving boundaries being one of the competencies
Yeah.
within the system. So really setting that boundaries, but from this place of what it is that we want to care for together in this moment. So it is not a hardening off or a cutting off or a excluding, but really a bringing in and a focusing of our attention, our intention, and our focus within this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Anything else, Seferino, as we kind of draw to a close here? Any last words for folks listening? Something you really want them to remember or take to heart?
Well, perhaps two things. Well, one, just to add on to your earlier question of how the possibilities for teams and organizations to get involved with this work. So as I mentioned, is the MCD Foundation's training for teams. Then there's also custom workshops around particular themes or challenges that organization or a team might be struggling with, whether
Ah,
that is
nice.
effective communication and honest expression, or empathy and self-empathy, recognizing reactivity, managing reactivity,
Mm-hmm.
self-regulation, de-escalation strategies. So whatever particular theme that team is struggling with or want to hone in on.
Yeah.
And then finally, there's also coaching and mediation support for any existing conflict or dynamics that might be present within a team or an organization. And then, so perhaps final note is this just some reassurance and an invitation to folks listening that our relationships is not, or at least doesn't have to be, this mysterious, impossible realm, but instead that there are some basic and concrete truths and skills that once we've cultivated them and integrated them, makes relationships and relating with others, our teams, much more skillful, effective, and that an MCD teams offers a pathway towards realizing that and becoming skillful and masterful at our relationships.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this work in the world and all the positive ripples that it will create and is creating.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here and to contribute this consciousness and the skills with the world, and particularly with organizations and teams at this time.
Yay. Thank you. And thanks for all the folks listening today or at any point. Just by tuning in, I'm having gratitude for your effort to live from this consciousness and skills. And I'm radiating love from my heart to yours.
You can learn more about mindful, compassionate dialogue and find free resources, live offerings, and self-paced workshops online at wiseheartcommunity.org. You can also find Wiseheart's new life-serving boundaries book, now available on the website.